Imagine for a moment writing your entire autobiography, not as, a tale of triumphs, this grand narrative of unwavering success, but instead framing it as a chronicle of ongoing, often quite challenging experiments. Experiments with the most fundamental concept of all, truth. It's a truly radical idea, isn't it? To lay bare your life, not to boast, not to build some kind of monument to yourself, but to meticulously document a relentless, lifelong inquiry into what it genuinely means to live truthfully, to be authentic, and, well, to serve a higher purpose. Today, we're taking a deep dive into precisely that extraordinary work, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's seminal autobiography, My Experiments with Truth. We're not just looking at a historical document or, a record of political victories. We're stepping into the mind of a man who fundamentally believed that life itself was this vast, open-ended laboratory for ethical and spiritual discovery. Every choice, every challenge, every personal struggle, it was all an opportunity to test a hypothesis about truth.
And what's truly illuminating here, I think, is that this isn't your typical biography, the kind designed to lionize its subject. Gandhi himself made a really crucial distinction. He explicitly stated it wasn't a story of his achievements, nor some boastful recounting of triumphs. Instead, he called it a Kadak, which is an account of his search and his experiments with truth. That distinction is absolutely pivotal. It really is, because it immediately sets the entire tone for understanding the unique nature of this work. It shifts our perspective, you see, from expecting this kind of hero's journey, a carefully curated legacy, to witnessing a humble seeker's earnest struggle. Almost like a scientist's ongoing field notes, right? Continually updated as his understanding deepened. He invites us into his messy, iterative process rather than just presenting some kind of polished outcome.
And what an incredibly intricate process it was. So our mission today is to unpack this extraordinary text. We want to go far beyond the well-known historical facts, really, to extract the key insights into Gandhi's profound philosophy, his incredibly personal journey, and, well, why these experiments continue to resonate so powerfully across the globe. We're going to discover how one man's relentless, almost scientific pursuit of truth, right down to the smallest, most intimate details of his daily life, how that reshaped a nation, and how it inspired movements for justice and freedom across the entire world. Get ready to truly understand the mind and heart of the Mahatma. Okay, so let's begin by tracing the origins of this remarkable and deeply personal document. This wasn't something he simply sat down to write all at once like a conventional memoir, was it? How did My Experiments with Truth actually come into existence?
No, it truly wasn't written like that at all. The genesis of this autobiography is, well, as unique as the man himself. It began its life in a much more intimate, yet simultaneously public way. Gandhi originally penned it in his native Gujarati language, and it wasn't published as a single volume initially. Rather, it appeared serially, in weekly installments, actually, over several years. Specifically, from 1925 to 1929, these chapters were published in his own influential journals, Navjivan in Gujarati, and its English counterpart, Young India. Now, this serialized format is incredibly significant. It really gives the work a very intimate, evolving, almost live-streamed feel. As he was living, reflecting, and continually engaging in his experiments with truth, he was sharing those ongoing reflections, those discoveries, and even his struggles with the world in almost real time. Later, recognizing its universal appeal and importance, his very close associate, Madhav Desai, undertook the monumental task of translating it into English. And that, of course, ensured its reach to a truly global audience.
That serialized format is such a crucial detail because it vividly underscores Gandhi's core intent, doesn't it? You mentioned it earlier, his explicit framing of this as an account of his search and experiments, not just a record of accomplishments. When you really lean into that distinction, why is it so incredibly important for us as readers today? What does it tell us about his fundamental approach to life, to leadership, and maybe even to spirituality?
That phrasing is absolutely foundational. It really is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it profoundly emphasizes his deep humility and his fundamental core belief that truth is God. This isn't a boast, you see, or some celebration of ego. It's an incredibly deep, often painful, and unflinchingly honest introspection. Gandhi doesn't shy away from revealing his own vulnerabilities, not at all. He openly discusses his weaknesses, his mistakes sometimes in, well, excruciating detail, and his struggles, both internal and external. By doing so, he transforms what might have been just a simple chronological record of events into what he essentially called a spiritual diary.
Wow.
It's a raw testament to a spiritual journey, with all its complexities, its imperfections, and those moments of doubt. It's not a carefully curated public image. And this radical transparency, this willingness to expose his own fallibility and the messy process of self-discovery, that's precisely what makes the book so powerful. And surprisingly, perhaps, so relatable. It genuinely raises an important question, doesn't it? How many public figures today, or indeed at any time in history, would dare to be so utterly transparent about their innermost thoughts, about their moral failings and their ongoing imperfect quest for truth? It's truly a rare and courageous act.
That's a fantastic observation. It really makes you pause and think about the nature of public figures, then and now. So it's less a polished memoir, designed to secure his legacy. It's more like a meticulously kept scientist's lab notebook. He's documenting his trials and errors, the hypotheses he tested, the unexpected results, and the profound discoveries he made along the path to understanding a universal and ultimate truth. He's inviting us, the readers, to witness the messy, iterative process of self-discovery and moral development, not just the final, perfected product. It's almost like we get to see the work behind the finished masterpiece, understanding the effort and the doubts that went into its creation. So where do these profound experiments begin? We're talking about a man who would become a global figure, revered as the Mahatma. But every journey starts somewhere small, right? Let's go all the way back to his early life and see the very first seeds of this experimental mindset taking root.
Precisely. The autobiography insightfully begins by delving into his roots, painting a picture of his formative years. He was born in Porbandar, a coastal town in Gujarat, into a deeply religious family. This upbringing naturally laid a strong, albeit traditional, spiritual and ethical foundation. It instilled in him values like truthfulness and devotion from early on. However, what's remarkable is that his autobiography doesn't shy away from personal challenges and moral dilemmas right from the outset. Not at all. He candidly mentions his early marriage at the tender age of 13, which was, a common social practice in those times. But he speaks openly and with a profound sense of self-awareness about the initial difficulties, the loss of his childhood innocence, and even a deep sense of guilt associated with it, particularly after the death of his father while he was, attending to marital duties. This raw honesty about such intimate, culturally sensitive experiences right in the opening chapters, it's a hallmark of the book. It immediately signals to the reader, this will be no hagiography. This will be an unflinchingly honest look at a life, including its less flattering aspects. He's showing us the young, imperfect Gandhi, already grappling with complex moral questions and personal responsibilities.
And then here's where it truly gets fascinating. For a young man from Porbandar, accustomed to Indian customs and traditions, he goes to London for his education, to become a barrister. This wasn't just a change of scenery or an academic pursuit. It became a crucial crucible, didn't it? Almost his first consciously chosen laboratory for his very first deliberate experiments in self-discipline and moral living. And this was long before he had any inkling of the political leader he would eventually become.
Absolutely. While in London, pursuing his legal studies, Gandhi wasn't just focused on jurisprudence. Far from it. He consciously started experimenting with strict vegetarianism, not merely as a dietary preference, mind you, but as a moral commitment. Rooted in his mother's vows and his growing ethical convictions, he actually details his struggles to maintain this, facing social pressures and, frankly, the blandness of available food back then. Eventually, he found a vegetarian restaurant and a community that supported him. But beyond diet, he began practices aimed at purity, simplicity, and self-control. Things like reducing expenses, learning to manage his own affairs. He even tried, quite amusingly, to adopt British customs, learn dancing and elocution, only to realize that true self-improvement lay in inner discipline, not just outward imitation. So these weren't just about what he ate or how he dressed, they were about the discipline of the body and mind. A rigorous testing of his own will and his commitment to principle. These early, seemingly small, personal choices were foundational to his character. They were the training ground, you could say. The initial sketches for his later, much more extensive and impactful personal and public experiments. They demonstrated his remarkable capacity for self-imposed discipline and his dedication to principles, even when it meant going against the prevailing social norms and his own inclinations.
That's a crucial insight. So even before he was a political leader, before he was advocating for the rights of millions, he was effectively testing the waters of self-discipline on himself, in his own life. It's like these early choices in London were the small-scale personal trials, the foundational research, almost, meticulously documenting the results in his spiritual diary. These were the preliminary data points for the grand experiments in truth, nonviolence, and self-rule that were yet to come. On a much larger national and even international stage, you can clearly see the trajectory beginning right there, in a London boarding house, as he started to understand the power of self-mastery. Okay, so from these deeply personal experiments in self-discipline in London, Gandhi then embarks on a journey that truly ignites his public life, and it confronts him head-on with the harsh realities of systemic injustice. his move to South Africa. This wasn't just a geographical change, was it? It was a profound shift in his life's purpose and the setting for his first grand public experiment with truth.
Indeed. He initially went to South Africa in 1893 for his legal practice. It was meant to be a professional endeavor, just for a year. But he was quickly, and quite brutally, confronted with the harsh realities of racial discrimination, or POM, as it's known in Hindi. It was pervasive and deeply institutionalized there at the time. The famous incident of him being thrown off a train in Pietermaritzburg, well, it's often cited, and for very good reason. He held a valid first-class ticket, yet he was forcibly removed simply because of his race. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a stark personal experience that crystallized his understanding of systemic injustice. It wasn't abstract anymore. It shattered his dignity, it enraged him, and it forced him to confront the moral bankruptcy of such prejudice. It was a truly pivotal moment where the abstract concept of discrimination became this deeply personal, infuriating reality for him. It shook him to his core and forced a critical reevaluation of his role in the world. He realized he couldn't just ignore it. He had to act.
And this experience, this moment of a profound personal indignity, it wasn't just a shock. It was the absolute catalyst for something entirely new, wasn't it? It's here, in the face of such blatant and dehumanizing injustice, that he began to develop and articulate the principle of satyagraha, a concept that would fundamentally redefine resistance, not just for India, but really for the entire world.
Right. And this raises an important question. What exactly is satyagraha? Because it's often misunderstood. It's crucial to understand it's not simply passive resistance that often implies weakness or inaction. Satyagraha is far from passive. It's active, it's powerful, and it's a deeply committed, peaceful protest against injustice. It literally translates to truth force, or maybe soul force. It embodies a profound adherence to truth, satya, and nonviolence, ahimsa. But beyond just being morally upright, satyagraha was also a profound psychological strategy. Think about it. It disarmed the oppressor by refusing to meet violence with violence. Instead, it exposed the moral bankruptcy of their actions to the world. It was a tool that forced introspection, not just in the practitioner who had to be willing to suffer without retaliation, but hopefully in the opponent too. Shifting the battlefield from physical might to moral conscience. And he didn't just theorize this. Well, in South Africa, facing discriminatory laws like the Asiatic Registration Act, the so-called Black Act, and the Transvaal Immigration Restriction Act, he organized numerous movements for the rights of Indians there. He led boycotts, marches, civil disobedience campaigns. Through these actions, he was not only fighting for justice, but also actively honing this powerful new tool, this moral weapon, that would ultimately change the course of history. It's truly fascinating how such a profound and globally influential philosophy emerged directly from such personal indignity and systemic oppression. He transformed his personal suffering into a universal method for change.
That railway incident, being physically thrown off the train, it's almost a perfect metaphor, isn't it, for how a moment of profound personal injustice can awaken a dormant desire for truth and action in an individual. Ignite a furnace of resolve. It was the spark that ignited the engine of satyagraha, transforming this quiet, unassuming lawyer into a formidable, morally unshakable force for social justice. It vividly demonstrates how deeply reflected personal experience can have truly global repercussions. So after 2 whole decades of honing his truth force, satyagraha, in the crucible of South Africa, developing these powerful methods of nonviolent resistance, he eventually returns to India in 1915. And that's when his influence truly began to spread nationwide, transforming him from a regional advocate to an undisputed national leader. This was a monumental shift, a coming home to apply his refined experiments on an even grander scale.
Yes. His return to India marked a new and absolutely critical phase in his life's experiments. And what's truly remarkable is that upon his return, he didn't immediately gravitate towards the established political elites. He didn't jump into national leadership right away. Instead, he spent a full year traveling extensively across India, observing, listening, immersing himself in the realities of ordinary people. He then immediately gravitated towards working with farmers, laborers, and the most marginalized sectors of society. His focus was always unequivocally on the most vulnerable, those who bore the brunt of exploitation and injustice under colonial rule and, let's be honest, rigid social structures too. This showed a consistent thread in his experiments with truth, that true justice and freedom must begin with uplifting the downtrodden. He immersed himself in their struggles, understanding their realities firsthand, choosing to live among them and experience their conditions.
What's truly striking here is how quickly his methods, refined in South Africa, proved so profoundly effective on Indian soil. They weren't just theoretical ideals. They delivered tangible results that captured the nation's attention and, crucially, their trust. Could you give us an example of how this played out in those early days?
Certainly. To truly grasp the impact, let's consider the Champaran Satyagraha in 1917. This is often considered his first major success in India. In Champaran, in Bihar, farmers were legally bound under the Tinkathia system. They had to cultivate indigo on a fixed portion of their land for British planters, often at ruinous prices, mind you. And they were subject to various illegal fees and harsh conditions. It was deeply exploitative. Gandhi arrived not as some distant leader, but living among the impoverished peasants. He interviewed thousands of them, meticulously collecting their testimonies of exploitation. He even faced arrest for defying a government order to leave the district. But his calm resolve and the overwhelming support of the mobilized farmers led to his release. His simple presence and unwavering commitment, coupled with the farmers' unified nonviolent resistance, their collective satyagraha, forced the British government to establish an inquiry committee. This committee, importantly, included Gandhi as a member, and it ultimately led to significant concessions for the peasants, including the abolition of the oppressive system and a refund of some of the illegal exactions. Now, this was more than just a local victory. It was a potent demonstration of Satyagraha's power on Indian soil. It cemented his reputation as a leader who genuinely fought for the common person, and it proved that nonviolent truth force could successfully challenge even entrenched colonial authority. Similarly, the Kheda Satyagraha saw farmers refusing to pay land tax during a famine, again leading to concessions. These initial victories were crucial. They weren't just about specific grievances. They were powerful demonstrations of a new ethical way of engaging with power.
So he didn't just win battles, he began to carve out this unique and indispensable space in Indian politics, growing in influence not through traditional political maneuvering or force, but through a unique brand of moral leadership.
Precisely. Those initial successes were pivotal. They weren't just about specific grievances, as I said. They were demonstrations of a new way of engaging with power that resonated deeply with the Indian populace. Gandhi didn't just win battles, he began to carve out a unique and indispensable space in Indian politics. His influence grew not through traditional political maneuvering or force, but through his unwavering commitment to his principles, truth, and nonviolence. Through his deep empathy for the suffering and his remarkable ability to mobilize ordinary people into a collective force for change. He was building a movement from the ground up, rooted in ethical conduct and the power of moral persuasion, transforming latent discontent into organized, purposeful action.
It's vital to remember, though, that while Gandhi was leading these monumental movements and spearheading national political and social change, he never, not for a moment, stopped his deeply personal experiments with truth. And these are some of the most unique and, frankly, for some, the most challenging and even controversial aspects of his autobiography. He truly believed the personal was inextricably linked to the political, that inner purification was a prerequisite for outer change.
You're absolutely right. He saw no real separation between his inner life, his spiritual journey, and his public actions. It was all one. He believed that the integrity of his external work depended entirely on the purity of his internal being. Throughout my experiments with truth, he details extensive experiments with diet. Really extensive. This included various forms of fasting, exploring natural foods, and maintaining an incredibly strict vegetarianism. He often went to extremes, like living on only fruits and nuts or experimenting with raw foods. Now, these weren't just health fads or casual dietary choices. For him, they were deeply spiritual practices, aimed at physical and mental purification, crucial for enhancing self-control, building inner strength, and cultivating a detachment from sensual desires. For example, he undertook fasts not just for personal discipline, but also sometimes for communal harmony, believing his penance could somehow atone for the violence of others. He believed that mastery over one's body and appetites was a prerequisite for mastery over one's mind, and ultimately for effective, selfless public service. It was about refining the instrument of his own being for a higher purpose.
And perhaps one of the most talked about and often misunderstood personal experiments was his vow of brahmacharya, or celibacy. This is where many modern readers might find themselves questioning or even struggling with his choices, given contemporary understandings of personal relationships and well-being.
Indeed, the pursuit of brahmacharya is one of the most intense and at times controversial aspects of his life's experiments, no doubt about it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, his pursuit was far more than mere physical abstinence. That's too simplistic. In the Indian spiritual tradition, brahmacharya is a profound quest for complete physical and mental purity. It's seen as absolutely essential for developing spiritual and moral strength and for conserving vital energy for higher intellectual and spiritual pursuits. For Gandhi, brahmacharya was about redirecting one's vital energy, one's life force, away from sensual pleasures and towards higher purposes. Purposes like selfless service to humanity, the relentless pursuit of truth, and intense spiritual work. He believed that to be fully dedicated to these ideals, one needed absolute control over their desires, transcending the ego and carnal attachments. He undertook this vow at the age of 37, having already been married and had children, which is important context. His experiments with it were lifelong, fraught with personal challenge, internal struggles with desire, and external criticism, even within his own circles. He experimented with radical forms of testing his resolve, which often drew severe censure, revealing the immense difficulty of living such an ideal, even for the Mahatma himself. It was a radical form of self-mastery, a profound personal experiment aimed at achieving a state of complete self-possession and moral clarity, which he considered indispensable for a true satyagrahi, a practitioner of truth force.
And then there's his unwavering commitment to a radically simple, almost ascetic life, which he practiced even when he was leading millions and engaging with global leaders. It wasn't just a philosophical stance, it was a daily lived reality, a constant experiment in self-reliance and minimalism.
Exactly. He practiced spinning his own clothes using the charkha, the spinning wheel, which became not just a symbol of the independence movement, but a literal act of self-reliance, or opportunely agmishabit. This wasn't just some quaint hobby, it was a powerful economic and political statement. Advocating for Indian self-sufficiency, resisting British textile imports, and promoting the dignity of labor for everyone, from peasant to leader, he also experimented extensively with health, often trusting in natural medicine, hydrotherapy, simple remedies over conventional drugs, believing deeply in the body's inherent capacity to heal and the importance of living in harmony with nature. These weren't isolated practices, you see. They were deeply integrated elements of his overarching philosophy of self-mastery and living authentically. His personal lifestyle was a living testament to the principles he championed for an entire nation: independence, simplicity, self-sufficiency, and truth.
It truly brings home the profound idea that for Gandhi, the personal was deeply, inextricably political. It really was. His inner journey, these intensely personal experiments, were just as significant and integral to his overall philosophy as his outer activism and his leadership of the freedom movement. He believed you couldn't separate the two, that one's internal state directly impacted their ability to lead and serve others with integrity. Okay, so with his personal philosophy firmly established and continually refined through these ongoing experiments, Gandhi then applied these principles to the grandest and most complex challenges facing India. Things like colonial rule, deeply entrenched social divisions, and the quest for true independence. His life's work wasn't just about self-transformation, but national transformation.
Indeed. He laid the foundation for larger political and social movements, not through conventional military or political maneuvering, but by grounding them firmly and unequivocally in the principles of nonviolence, ahimsa, and satyagraha. These weren't just pragmatic tactics for him, they were moral imperatives, absolute moral imperatives. He genuinely believed that the means were as important as the ends, and that unjust or violent means could never lead to a truly just and lasting outcome. So the monumental movements he initiated, like the non-cooperation movement from 1920 to 22, which saw millions boycott British goods and institutions, and the salt satyagraha in 1930, where he famously led a march to the sea to illegally make salt. These were powerful demonstrations of these moral principles in action, mobilizing millions without resorting to violence. He taught people to willingly suffer, to invite the blows of the oppressor, knowing that such sacrifice would awaken the conscience of the world.
But his work extended far beyond just political independence from British rule, didn't it? He saw the need for a holistic liberation, recognizing that India could not be truly free if it remained shackled by its own internal social evils. What were some of these deeper societal experiments he undertook?
That's a crucial point. His vision was far more expansive than merely achieving political freedom, much more. He actively struggled against untouchability or hanamate, a deeply entrenched social injustice that denied basic human dignity and rights to millions of Dalits, or Harijans as he called them, meaning children of God. He didn't just preach against it from afar. He lived in Harijan colonies, he cleaned latrines himself, and he fought for their temple entry rights. Often facing resistance, it's important to note, even from orthodox sections of his own community. And crucially, he tirelessly worked towards Hindu-Muslim unity, understanding that a divided nation could never truly be free or strong. This was a challenge he grappled with until his very last days. He consistently called for Sallana, equal respect for all religions, advocating for interfaith harmony. And he actively integrated prayers from various faiths into his daily routines at his ashram. This demonstrates that his vision wasn't just political freedom from colonial rule, it was about creating a fundamentally just equitable and unified society from within, believing that moral transformation had to precede or at least accompany political transformation.
That truly helps unpack the why behind his multifaceted approach. It really does. It shows a leader who saw profound interconnectedness in everything. For Gandhi, true freedom required liberation from external political oppression and liberation from deeply rooted internal social evils like untouchability and communal strife. He understood that these were two sides of the same coin, and one could not be achieved meaningfully or sustainably without the other. His experiments extended to the very fabric of society, seeking to apply truth and nonviolence to heal its deepest wounds. Okay, as we've journeyed through Gandhi's life and these incredible experiments, let's try to distill the core ideas that emerge from them. What are the bedrock principles, the enduring messages that stand out, the fundamental takeaways from his lifelong quest?
Right. At the very heart of his philosophy, you find these 5 interconnected principles, which he lived, breathed, and continually refined through his experiments. First, truth, satya. Gandhi famously declared, truth is God. First at God. Now, this wasn't a casual statement or just some philosophical observation. It was the foundation of his entire being, an ultimate reality. For him, it meant one must speak truthfully, act truthfully, and seek truth in all circumstances, recognizing that factual accuracy was just one layer of a deeper ultimate reality, which he literally equated with the divine. It's the ultimate reality and the ultimate goal of human existence, to be pursued at all costs. Second, nonviolence, ahimsa. He profoundly believed that violence only leads to further destruction, a perpetual cycle of retaliation. While love, patience, and compassion offer the only lasting and constructive solutions, ahimsa for him was not a passive state. It was an active force, a positive assertion of love requiring immense courage, not merely to abstain from physical violence, but to actively engage with the oppressor through nonviolent means, to appeal to their conscience, and to willingly suffer the consequences without bitterness or hatred. It was a strategy of, well, moral jujitsu perhaps, transforming the opponent's aggression into a catalyst for their own or the world's moral awakening. For example, during the Salt March, instead of confronting British soldiers with violence, the Satyagrahis would march forward ready to be beaten, demonstrating the moral bankruptcy of the colonial rule without raising a hand. Third, Satyagraha. As we discussed, this is the practical method, the dynamic application of truth and nonviolence. It's active, peaceful protest against injustice, first developed and refined in South Africa and then powerfully employed in India. It's truth force in action, a moral means to achieve just ends, rooted in the belief that moral persuasion and self-suffering can ultimately transform the heart of the oppressor. Fourth, self-control at Masamyama. Practices like celibacy, simple food, fasting. These weren't ascetic whims or mere acts of deprivation. They were seen as essential pathways to inner strength, mental purity, and spiritual discipline. He believed that without mastery over one's own body, senses, and desires, a leader would inevitably be swayed by personal ambition, fear, or attachment. This self-control, cultivated through rigorous internal experiments, was about refining oneself into an instrument pure enough to serve a higher purpose, making one immune to corruption and capable of unwavering commitment to truth, even in the face of death. And fifth, religion and spirituality. What's truly fascinating here is his incredibly syncretic approach, his openness. While he was deeply rooted in Hinduism and drew extensively from its scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita, he was also profoundly influenced by and drew inspiration from the Bible, the Quran, and texts from Jain and Buddhist traditions. His was a vision of Chinafya, equal respect for all religions. This wasn't just a passive tolerance, it was an active interfaith spiritual pursuit, a belief that all genuine faiths converged on universal ethical truth. He practically demonstrated this by incorporating prayers and teachings from diverse religions into his ashram routines, fostering a lived example of unity and understanding.
These aren't just abstract, lofty ideas to be contemplated in some academic setting, are they? What's so profoundly powerful about Gandhi's life and his autobiography is that these principles are active, living guides. They informed his every decision. Whether deeply personal or profoundly public, they were the very fabric of his existence, the ever-present framework for his lifelong experiments. Now, let's talk about the book itself. As a piece of writing, as a literary and historical document, what's it actually like to read My Experiments with Truth? Is it an easy read, a challenging one, or maybe something else entirely?
Well, the language is often described as remarkably simple, clear, and incredibly intimate. Surprisingly so, perhaps. There's an almost startling absence of pretense or exaggeration that you often find in autobiographies, especially of prominent public figures. Gandhi wasn't trying to impress you with flowery language or, intellectual acrobatics. Instead, it was just recounting events in a dry, chronological fashion. The emphasis is consistently on self-reflection and on the moral lessons he drew from each experience. This makes it a very personal, honest, and profoundly thought-provoking read. You feel like you're having a direct conversation with him almost, witnessing his internal wrestling with moral dilemmas rather than simply reading a historical account. It's almost conversational in its earnestness.
So, beyond its content and its unique experimental framework, what makes this autobiography truly stand out as a literary work and a historical record? What are its key strengths that have given it such enduring power across generations and continents?
There are several profound strengths, I think, that make this book truly exceptional and universally resonant. Firstly, its honesty and radical self-acceptance. As we've discussed, he openly details his mistakes, his weaknesses, his moments of doubt, and even his perceived moral failings from stealing in his youth to his marital struggles. This level of self-scrutiny and acceptance, this unflinching candor, is incredibly rare and disarming for a figure of his stature. It makes him profoundly human. Secondly, it serves as a powerful source of moral and spiritual education. For any reader, really, it acts as an inspiration and a guide for improving one's own life, fostering introspection, encouraging ethical living. It's less a how-to guide for political action and more a how-I-tried manual for living truthfully and striving for moral excellence. Thirdly, it holds immense historical significance. The book offers an unparalleled first-person glimpse into the foundational years of India's freedom movement, particularly up to 1921, and the evolving ideas that would shape Gandhi's leadership. It gives us an intimate context for the birth of a nation's independence struggles and the unique philosophy that powered it. And perhaps most profoundly, its global impact. This raises an important question, doesn't it? How many books, how many personal accounts can genuinely claim to have profoundly influenced global leaders and movements for justice across diverse cultures? Its reach is truly profound, inspiring figures like Martin Luther King Jr. in the American Civil Rights Movement, who explicitly cited Gandhi's methods, and Nelson Mandela during the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, who drew immense strength from Satyagraha. Its capacity to inspire nonviolent resistance and calls for justice across diverse cultures and continents continues to be felt today, a testament to its timeless principles.
Of course, every great work, especially one as intensely personal and philosophical as this, has its critics. And this book is no exception. It's important to look at it from all angles, I think, to gain a truly balanced perspective. What are some of the limitations or criticisms often leveled against my experiments with truth?
That's right, a balanced perspective is essential. There are a few common points of critique that are definitely worth considering. Firstly, its limited scope. As mentioned, the autobiography only covers events up to 1921. This means it misses the decisive battle for India's independence, the iconic Salt March, the Quit India movement, and many of the most significant later campaigns and the ultimate triumph of his efforts, as well as a tragic partition of India and his assassination. This can be frustrating for readers looking for a complete historical narrative of his political life. It just isn't there. Secondly, some argue there is excessive detail on his experiments with diet and health. Now, while these were absolutely central to his philosophy of self-mastery and inner purification, for a reader primarily interested in the political or social aspects, these extensive sections can sometimes feel a bit tangential, maybe repetitive or overly granular. Thirdly, at times, it can certainly feel a bit like a preachy tone. Given its nature as a spiritual diary and a moral discourse, Gandhi sometimes adopts a didactic style that, for some readers, might come across as lecturing rather than simply sharing his journey. It's a book written for moral instruction, after all. And finally, regarding modern relevance, if we connect this to the bigger picture, some of his more extreme personal experiments, like the rigor of his celibacy or certain dietary restrictions, might seem strange, impractical, or even controversial to a modern reader, particularly outside his specific cultural and spiritual context. For example, his radical tests of brahmacharya late in life, inviting young women to sleep near him to test his self-control. Well, that generated significant debate and criticism even during his lifetime. This doesn't necessarily diminish the book's overall value or the profanity of his core message, but it is certainly a significant point of discussion. And it can be a hurdle for contemporary audiences, requiring a willingness to engage with ideas that might challenge our own assumptions about how to live and what constitutes ethical behavior.
So taking all of this into account, the immense strengths, the acknowledged limitations, the profound insights, and the challenging aspects, what does my experiments with truth ultimately mean for us today? What is its lasting importance and timeless relevance in our incredibly complex modern world?
Ultimately, this book is far more than just Gandhi's life story. It really is. It's a living Kantian, a philosophy of life, a comprehensive worldview. It's not just a historical account confined to India's struggle. It's a living guide to living ethically, purposefully, and authentically in any age. It offers a framework for continuous self-improvement and moral growth, predicated on the belief that personal transformation is the precursor to societal change.
And what's truly remarkable is how pertinent and urgent those values remain in our current global landscape, isn't it? The fundamental values it champions truth in an era of misinformation, non-violence in a world rife with conflict, and profound ethics in an age of moral ambiguity. They're truly as relevant today, perhaps even more so than they were when Gandhi first penned these words. In a world grappling with deep divisions, environmental crises, and ethical dilemmas, his insights offer profound guidance and, well, a powerful alternative path.
Absolutely. Social justice, peace, self-control. These are not abstract ideals confined to the past. They are universal values that can still fundamentally make any society better, healthier, and more equitable. The book concludes by emphasizing a truly profound point, that greatness isn't born from external achievements alone, or from a flawless record of success. Rather, it emerges from the earnest, often imperfect, efforts to live truthfully and honestly, mistakes and all. Constantly striving for self-correction and moral growth. It's the journey, the continuous striving, the willingness to be vulnerable in that pursuit that defines true character and builds lasting change. And that message is incredibly empowering, I think, for anyone seeking to live a more meaningful life.
It's no surprise, then, that My Experiments with Truth is given a stellar 4.5 out of 5 rating by those who have truly delved into its pages. It comes highly recommended for anyone seeking to understand not just history, but also the enduring power of ethics, the depth of human spirituality, and the raw, often uncomfortable, truth of personal struggle on the path to a higher purpose. It's a book that demands engagement, but rewards it immensely. Our deep dive into My Experiments with Truth reveals a man who truly walked his talk, often, literally, with every step being an observation, a test, a learning experience, and a meticulously documented entry in his life's ongoing ledger. His autobiography is a testament to the transformative power of relentless self-reflection, unyielding honesty, and the courageous pursuit of one's deepest convictions, even when they challenge societal norms or personal comfort. It's a blueprint not just for political action, but for a life lived with profound intention and purpose.
And this raises an important question, I think, for all of us listening. In a world inundated with information, often superficial interactions, and where presenting a perfect image is frequently prioritized, how can we in our own lives embrace experiments with truth? How can we cultivate the kind of radical honesty and profound self-reflection that Gandhi advocated, even in our own small daily interactions and choices? It leaves you pondering, doesn't it? How you might apply these ancient yet timeless principles to your own journey of growth, authenticity, and deeper understanding.
A truly thought-provoking challenge to leave us with. We hope this deep dive has given you a richer understanding of Gandhi's philosophy, the man behind the legend, and maybe inspired you to explore these powerful ideas further in your own way. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep learning.